you see the sun is shining on me? It makes me feel so free, so alive. It makes me want to survive. And the sky, it makes me feel so high. The bad times pass me by, 'cause today is gonna be a brighter day. Can you feel the sunshine? Does you?
Hey everybody! Hey, so it's the first episode of KupoRadio. Ta-da! All shiny, nice, new. So I've been around the community for a while. My name's Rob. I'm your host. Been around since the game released. It's been several years now. Just happened to get it to this point finally, and we're just going to sort of cover the basics today over the next hour, hopefully less depending on how complicated this gets. We're going to go through the basics from the beginning of the game to the end, of just pretty much everything a beginner needs to know. There's going to be some future episodes where we're going to talk about things such as priority and stack, deck building. Those kind of things are going to be sort of covered in a separate video, partly because they can tend to be a little bit complex. So let's go ahead, and for those who are familiar, there's a packet that comes in the starter kit. I wanted to mention this first and foremost, mainly because in the starter kits there's the older versions like 13, 10, 7, I believe, which is the first 3 starter decks. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because these rules actually changed. These rules actually changed from the current version, which is the 2019 starter decks, versus the older starter decks. I wanted to point that out because if you're trying to start to learn, depending on what printing you get of the starter decks, these rules will be different. So you want to make sure that you learn off of the newest rule set. There are certain cards that didn't exist back then, such as monsters, and just several mechanics and things that were a bit different. The basis is there, but things are going to be slightly different. So you want to make sure to have the newer rule set. So to start off, we have 4 different types of cards. We have your forwards, which will be like your actual dealer of damage. When you hit 7 points of damage, that's when the person who takes the 7 points of damage loses. The person who deals it wins. There's backups, there's monsters, and then there's summons. There's other types of cards as well. These are known as S cards. They're starter deck exclusive cards. So the thing about these is that they actually come in, and they're specific to the sets. So like Sarah S, Cloud S, Red 13, all of these cards only come in the starter decks as non-foil versions. If you buy booster packs from different opuses, they actually come in a foil version, but they're harder to pull. So that is definitely something you consider. There are competitive cards in these decks. It's not like most games where you buy a starter, and some of these may not be valid after some time. There are S cards that are still used today. One of the examples is in the 13 deck. If you look up between FF7 and Final Fantasy X on the top right, that deck contains a Jill card, which is a Jill EX card, which is an S card, which is still used pretty often in Ice. Depending on where we go, there may be some other options, but that's a commonly used card. There are also cards that are known as promotional cards. These are considered special promotional cards. Something such as Cloud in the top left, which is A-001, A-002, which is the next one underneath, and then the newest one, which is given away at FanFest from Final Fantasy XIV in Japan, which is A-003 for the upcoming Stormbringers, end of Stormbringers, and then beginning of Shadowbringers, sorry, and end of Stormblood. Those two sort of mesh together, and then you get Stormbringers, I guess. But there's also the 30th anniversary Gabranth on the top right, which is given only occasionally in the States, more common overseas. And then we have the current promo that's running that's Lastwell on the right from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. They are the Heroes and Villains deck, which I mentioned earlier with the S cards, is also good value. It has like a lot of legends and everything. There are unique promo cards too. These unique ones are the 3 cards that are unique only in the sense that their abilities are not printed on any other card. They were the first 3 promos that were released. We eventually Square Enix changed the way that they release promos because they didn't want it to be hyper competitive over the promos and have a high cost over promos, and so they decided to go with alternate arts. But Sephiroth, Vincent, and Lightning all have unique abilities solely to these 3 promo cards. Their alternate art cards are essentially cards, as you see here, Sarah, who is in Opus 4 as a hero card, comes in, and she is actually from the Opus set, the plain Opus set on the left. The right card is what is an alternate art card, and so what this is basically the same card as what you would pull in the series set. The only difference is that it has alternative art that come in foil and non-foil. It's something you actually earn participating at your local store by winning, if you in tournaments or whatnot. Sometimes you get them at events, like if you go to what are called Crystal Cups, which are major events. Those are sometimes given away along with any of the promos, pretty much. But it might be harder to find the other 3 that we mentioned, Sephiroth, Vincent, and Lightning, because those are out the first year. But you could probably find them like at third place marketplace, third party marketplace. And then we have special alt art promos. What these are is that they're essentially a special version that's also a promo that's also alternate art. So in this case, we have Lightning here from Opus 3. There is a fighting game release that was called Final Fantasy Dissidia NT for PlayStation 4 and other platforms. In this specific version, on the actual package itself, it denotes that it comes with 3 special cards. There are alternate art versions, Lightning, Cloud, and Warrior of Light. These cards are basically alt art Dissidia versions of their counterparts. And then we have, which is our most current promo run, that Square Enix is giving out full art versions. Essentially, on the left side is your standard version that you'd pull from an Opus. On your right side is the full art version that actually comes out. They come, of course, in foil and non-foil. Full arts are sort of a big deal. You can get some of these cards, such as the Cloud full art, which is the newest version. He comes in a buy a box promo. So you purchase a box. Inside the box comes with a promotional card. Opus 7 and Opus 8 are the only 2 opuses that had buy a box promos currently. We had Noctis and then we had Cloud. So those 2 are the 2 sets if you buy, if they are still in stock, because not all boxes currently have the box art promo. Like most stores in Opus 7, they actually handed them out. They came separate. In Opus 8, they come in the box. For the first print run. We don't know how that's going to continue yet. We may have details on that later. So now that you know all the promo cards, we're going to go into, and the types of cards, we're going to go into the anatomy of a card. So we'll take a look at Mog here on the left. On the top left, these are called CP, or crystal points. You notice the number 3. That's how many CP you have to pay to play this card. On section 2, that's the name of the card on the top there. If you fall over to section 3, that is his card type. He is either forward, backup, summon, monster, etc. In the center there, Moogle, that is the job class. Some of them have spy. As you can see, there's Cactuar there. Job girl, which is often highly debated about. And then on number 5 here on the far right is their category, what kind of game they come from. So they either come from Theater Rhythm, 7, 9, if they're a special card, and they specifically are new art, whatever category they fall into, that's going to matter as well. Category 7 is what we call, I guess, an allowable action. Essentially, what the text does, you basically read it, you make sure you follow it to a T. There are erratas, so if something is changed or if a card is changed, generally in a reprint, usually the community tends to keep track of that. There are some on the official website that have errata, however, not all are listed there. So people are working on gathering a list of those errata. Section 6 is the card number. The 1 at the beginning is the opus it comes from. The numbers after the dash are the card number in that set. And then on the far right, the S is the rarity. Cards come in common, rare, starter, hero, and legend. So starters, again, are exclusively in the starter deck. Common, and then rare is more like uncommon in most games. And hero, is more like rare. And then legend are like the higher end cards that you would generally pull. If you look at Kate Sith, there are 2 very important things on Kate Sith. On the top right, there's an EX burst symbol. This is a symbol that if you take damage and it flips into your damage zone, it happens immediately. You can't respond to it. It resolves immediately. There are decks that are based around this. There are people like Nick Schnell, one of my friends, who dumps as many EXs as possible in it, and the strategy is to flip the EXs. And then on the bottom right, there's what's called the power level. Very important for your forwards. Your forwards are the only ones that have power levels, and this absolutely matters. You'll just, note it for now. On the Cactuar, the important thing is this is a monster. On the top right corner, some cards have what's called a multi-card symbol. Now this symbol basically states that you can play as many of that character as you can. In a deck, you can only have up to 3 of the same card. So ideally, if you have the multi-card symbol, in this case on Cactuar, you can have up to 3 Cactuars out at once. The thing about that is that if it doesn't have a multi-card symbol, you can only play 1 copy at a time on that field itself. If it does, then you're welcome to play, as many as you are allowed to have up to as copy of a card. Next, we're going to move to elements of the card. There are different elements in the game. There's fire, ice, wind, earth, lightning, water, light, and dark. We're going to go ahead and break down each element, generally what they're known for, some of the play styles. This is something you might want to also consider in deck building. I know that we aren't going to touch into it too in depth today, but I feel that this is a good basis to sort of determine your play style. First, we have fire. It's known for burn. It's known for being fast, deals increments of damage, and it keeps opponents sometimes from blocking, breaking, and sometimes you can force them to attack. Examples would be Vivi, which is a legend card from Opus 3. When Vivi enters the field, choose 1 forward the opponent controls, deal it 4,000 damage, and 1,000 more damage for each card in your opponent's hand. So in this case, it punishes your opponent for having more cards in hand. The more cards they have, the greater damage Vivi deals. You also have Red Mage, which is where you choose 1 forward, and it can't block this turn. And then same thing with Yatsuyu. Yatsuyu, though, is you choose 1 forward at 5 cost or less. It cannot block. So the difference is Yatsuyu actually costs 1 fire CP. And if you look on the card itself, there's a little arrow. This arrow is what is called a dull symbol. It is a part of the cost you have to pay. So you pay 1 CP, you dull Yatsuyu to do the effect. Meanwhile, Red Mage, if you look, has a fire and a white symbol next to it with a 1 in it. That means you have to generate 1 fire CP and any other color and dull. So that way, in this case, Red Mage may cost 1 more, but it is any forward you want to choose. Yatsuyu has to be a forward of 5 cost or less. And we'll talk about generating CP and how all of that works, but these are just a couple of examples for fire. Next we have Ice, which is Dull and Freeze. It is an element that's sort of my favorite. It has a lot of characters that I personally like. If you look on the left side, you see Jill from the starter set. That is a common card I use. It's great for the EX bursts, and just in general, it's a really, really strong card for freezing multiple targets. They have the ability to lock down the board, and there's also decks that are discard cards that allow you to make your opponent discard from their hand. You basically essentially starve them for resources, which is a whole nother thing, which was a popular deck at the time. Right now we have Wind. Wind has protection and mill capabilities and actually specializes in reactivations of backups and forwards. Often Wind, especially with Bartz and Aerith, and the ability to constantly be activating your backups, it gives you the ability to generate more crystal points or more CP in a turn to be able to do more things. It also helps with the efficiency and playing of forwards. And then we have Earth with Mr. Dumpy. Thanks to Chris for that. Shantoto. And sort of a joke on that. I mean, it's a big board wipe. It's a very popular card. But these guys like to sort of stay on the board. Deleta, which goes onto the board if your opponent uses abilities on Deleta. They break if you cast a summon on Deleta. You take damage. So they also have a wide array of what are called rainbow CP generators. Leo, Shantoto, Moogle from Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. These actually are able to generate multiple elements. So they're often used in like rainbow decks, or they can be used in off-color decks, which tend to be, considerably strong depending on how you use it. And then there's Lightning. It's known for being quick. It also has tons of lightning. The character, it specializes in power reduction, has combo damage. It likes to hit damage, get it in fast. It likes to move things out of the way. Some of these cards, like Alba and Alua, also have protection on themselves if you meet the conditions, which are really effective. Same thing with Lightning. If you look on the left side, it's Opus 4 Lightning. She tends to combo with a lot of 13 characters. I personally use it in Lightning Ice. When we talk about deck building, I'm going to be more than glad to show you guys my deck, and how I went about my choices. But Lightning is for those who want to hit fast and quickly. We have Water here. It's known as the card advantage element. There's tons of pirates in there. Layla Vikings is a big thing. So essentially, when a Viking dies, when it comes in, you draw a card. When it dies, you draw a card. You play Layla, it brings the Viking back. It's just big card advantage. It likes to, flood the board with forwards, and it likes to bounce cards, meaning instead of where most things have permanent removal, this just sort of returns things back to your opponent's hand, and just makes it really inconvenient, because if somebody's attacking me and all of a sudden they return that card back to my hand, I can no longer block with that. So that's also, just sort of an inconvenience that's advantageous. It's not necessarily permanent removal all the time. They also have a lot of tricks. They have immense power reduction, Cloud of Darkness, so many cards that reduce power, and then you have draw like Mog who draws you an extra card. So when we get into the game flow, we'll talk about how many cards you can draw. Mog allows you to draw an additional card when you use its ability. Here we have Dark, the Dark element. They're known for having oppressive capabilities. So in other words, if you have Emperor out, you're not allowed to use special abilities or action abilities. Camlino is also an oppressive card in a different way. You're allowed to change what element Camlino is. So what happens is, if you decide to choose, fire one turn, and somebody tries to combo you with Vivi, we mentioned earlier, that damage doesn't happen because he's immune to the element that is chosen. And you can choose to change that element, so it's very effective against monocolored decks. So if you want to put that in, you can only have one dark card out unless you have, cards like Chaos or Cosmos. You'll learn that you can't have multiple light and dark out on the field, and you can't also have a dark card and a light card on the same time on the field. Of course, with the exceptions that we will go into depth later. Here we have light cards. I call them purely versatile. They fit in decks with many options. Cosmos, which is essentially another rainbow CP generator. When you use her in the field, she can make any color. You can put multiple light cards in the field because of her. We have Medine, which is from Opus 8, which is fairly new. There's a lot of combat tricks with Medine and Garnet, reducing damage that's dealt to your own forwards versus the whole board. Which we will go into as well. We have Hrace Velgar. Hrace Velgar is also very effective if you want, an extra turn, or maybe you want to move all the cards in the break zone so that they can't, bring something back from the break zone. It's also, fairly important. So here we're using my playmat to talk about the zones in this game. On the top right is your deck. The break zone is sort of like what people refer to, if you're coming from Magic, as a graveyard, is what often a lot of people tell me. It's just a place where cards go when you discard, or when something dies or breaks, it goes in that zone. Removed from game is also a card zone where it's literally out of the game. You can't bring it back, you can't fetch it. That's often pretty popular with cards like Yuna. Essentially what happens is that you would bounce a card back to their hand. Let's say their hand is empty. You know to bounce it back. You'd play something to cause a discard. You discard that card, and then what you would do is you would tell Yuna to remove it from the game, so that if it has an effect like Renoa from Opus 2, where if it hits the break zone, everything dulls. Since it gets removed from the game, it never hits the break zone, therefore that never executes. So it's important to understand what removed from the game actually is and how it affects your gameplay, and deciding how to mitigate that. I mean, again, it's not too often that removed from game happens, but essentially it does really matter. On the left side, there is Damage Zone. Damage Zone is where you take those 7 points of damage. Once you take up to 7 points of damage, that's when you lose the game. If you're in other formats, sometimes it's 6 points of damage. In the future, there may be cards that extend that damage zone to 8 points. I know that in the previous Final Fantasy Chapters game, there were cards that extended the amount of damage you could take. In the field, which is the center of this here, the playmat, we're going to look at these zones here. Forwards are going to go at the top. Monsters don't have a designated area, but for me, I like them in the center. Reason being is because when you learn about monsters, some monsters can become forwards, so they can shift from the middle aisle up to the top aisle. And it's also helpful to not be confusing, because like for newer players, right, you see things in the forward spot and you see monsters mixed in with forwards, and for some people they don't understand that monsters are not forwards all the time, or maybe they're currently a monster and they're not a forward, and that can get very, very confusing and deceptive, because you have that top row with monsters and forwards mixed together, and it's like you're determining what you want to do, and that makes a difference in how you approach your tactic. So I put monsters in the center. People at my locals tend to put monsters in the center. It's more of like a courtesy thing. But again, there's no designation for monsters. All the other zones are generally where everything goes. Backups towards the bottom, like your support and everything. So this is like the general layout. So we're going to go into gameplay and just the general phases. We have active phase, draw phase, main phase 1, attack phase, main phase 2, and end phase. At the start of the game, the first turn player draws one card. So if you're going first, you draw the one card initially. If you're going second, you're drawing 2 cards. And then after that, every turn afterwards is 2 cards every turn. So every time after the first turn, everyone draws 2 cards at the beginning. Again, gameplay, game flow, priority, and the stack will be more covered in depth in a later episode. That whole process is rather lengthy, so it's a very important topic, and we want to make sure to cover it in a way that everybody can understand and go back and replay and go through that process and understand that process well. because it's one of the most important processes. So I do want to note it's possible to lose to deck out and mill if you can't draw 2 cards on your turn, or you can't mill when someone makes you mill, you lose the game. So an example of this would be, let's say I literally have 1 card left. I go to draw. I can't draw the second card, so that's it for me. If I have 2 cards left, and my opponent makes me discard both cards, and I have no cards, and then I go to draw, like if there's no cards, or that's game. Or I have no cards, it's my last turn, and somebody decides to mill me or make me draw or do something in a way, or I go to draw. Like let's say I have a monster that's called Layak out, and they trigger my effect, and I have to go to draw, and I have nothing to draw, then I also lose. So they can mill you out, you can lose by drawing, or you can also lose because you can't draw due to an effect. Whether it's a mill, whether it's a draw, etc. So that's very important, because if you can't push through and you need to win, that's an alternative way to win. You can make someone lose their cards and deck them out versus pushing through damage if you can't push through damage, which has happened to a few of my friends before while playing. So we're going to talk about CP generation. So you generate CP or crystal points with backups. If you look at the top left, you'll see Chocobo Chick. It's active and untapped. When you tap it, it goes sideways, which is called dull or tapped. That generates 1 CP point of that element. So Chocobo Chick generates 1 fire CP. You can also discard to play a backup. So let's say I have 2 Chocobo Chicks in my hand. I discard a Chocobo Chick. It generates 2 fire CP, which then is used to pay for the Chocobo Chick I have here. If you look at the top left corner, as I mentioned earlier in the anatomy of a card, that's the cost. You have to pay at least 2 CP to play this card. Whether it's generated from discarding a card from your hand of that element to play that card, or whether you use it to tap and pay for that card from your other backups on the field, either way is fine. The exception to that is if you're playing a light or dark card, you can use any element to pay for it. Fire, ice, lightning, earth, water, wind, etc. You cannot use dark and light. I need to be very clear about this because there was a lot of confusion at the beginning. Light and dark may not be discarded to generate CP. There is no such thing as light CP or dark CP. If it's in your hand and you have more than one and you can't play it on your field, then it's stuck in your hands. The only exception to discarding a light or dark card is if your hand reaches 6 cards or more. You can discard down, you can get rid of that light or dark card. So let's say that you have 5 in your hand, you draw 2, you play 1, you have 6 cards in your hand at the end of the turn. You can get rid of the light or dark card that way. You can also get rid of a light or dark card if someone forces you to discard and you decide to make that as your choice to discard a card. You choose that light or dark card, but only if it is your choice and you're allowed to choose from the effect. There are some effects where they can choose discard too. So just be in mind when you're building decks, light and dark cards have limitations as to how many can be out, what those conditions are. You can't generate certain CP from them. While they're rainbow when you tap them, right? Like Chaos and Cosmos, you tap them on the back of the field. You go from active to dull to generate 1 CP of any color. It doesn't work with light and dark on discard. You can't discard either of those, again, to make dark or light CP. That does not exist in this game. When you discard a card, it's placed into the break zone. So that break zone above removed from game, very important that you understand how to generate CP properly and efficiently. Sometimes when you're getting into really serious games, it matters how efficiently you pay and play for your resources. That can determine a lot in regards to how efficiently you're playing things and you being able to do more with what you have. So we're going to start with the stack. I'm going to go over this briefly. This is very important, and I figured this is one of the best examples of the stack to use. We have Y'shtola from Opus 5, which is pretty popular these days. It has been for quite some time. Y'shtola doesn't receive any damage from summons or abilities. You put Y'shtola into the break zone, you choose one summon or auto ability, and you cancel its effect. Versus the Yuna and Lin combo. Len, when you put Len, forms a party with card name Yuna and attacks. You may search for one summon and cast it without paying the cost. If you do not cast it, put the summon in the break zone. If you cast a summon of 5 cost or more with this ability, you put Len into the break zone. So some fun things to cast. You can cast Arc, which is like 10 CP, which is probably one of our largest CP to date cards as far as summons, and or even Medine. But since they're both over 5 CP, Len would break and go to the break zone. This tends to be fun if you really need something devastating. Some people can do like 4 off-colored summons because it's any color summon. So you can do any element of summon. She searches it, and then you cast it. And then we go to Yuna, which is when Yuna attacks. All characters other than light and dark, again, other than light and dark, the opponent controls, lose all their abilities until the end of the turn. And then she has sphere change. Name one element and one job. Yuna becomes that name and job until the end of turn. Now, why this is important as to what these cards do. You have, a pair of cards that when they attack, they cast a summon. And then you have Y'shtola here who cancels the summon. But the order that you do the stack absolutely matters. A lot of people say first in, last out. It's generally, but not always. Again, we're going to cover it in a separate episode, because it can be very complex. But for this example, on the board we have your opponent up top, you have us down here. When these two attack, the way that you want to put this in the stack is you declare your attack. When Yuna and Len attack, you search for a card. In this case, we're searching for Shiva. We want to do Len's ability next on the stack and pull the Shiva out. And then we want to put Yuna's ability above that. So the reason why this matters is because Yuna blanks a card, right? So if you blank Y'shtola, she can't be put in the break zone to cancel your summon effect. If you do the reverse, which is essentially you're putting Yuna's ability on the stack and then Len's ability on the stack, that card, Y'shtola, will still have its abilities when you cast Shiva. So what happens is that, Y'shtola can put herself into the break zone and cancel the effect, and then after that goes through, Yuna's ability blanks whatever cards are left on the field. But that's not going to do us any good because we want to stop Y'shtola from canceling our summon. So this is like a big example of importance on the stack, right? Because you want to make sure that Yuna's ability goes in last because it'll resolve first. So again, the order is, you declare attack, you swing with both. Before blocks are declared, you have to make sure you put Len's ability next, find the summon, cast it, put Yuna's ability on top of that, so that when it resolves from going backwards from top down, it clears Y'shtola and any text that she might have. That's the proper way to use Yuna and Len. If you do it the other way, you're blanking the cards, but you're not blanking them in time to prevent any of that. So it's very important. So today I sort of wanted to take time to point out the resources and all the wonderful people that make the community go around. Definitely people you can check out, and just so many kind people who have done so much to make this community feel like home and welcoming people and everything. We have cards of Ivalice by James Lockwood. We have Tonberry King, trading game card pit. We have level 1 Onion Knight, Jason Grand. We have NV Games, Meta Potion, the Esperden, Yuna Young Team, RVA Returners, the Crystal Tower, Chocobros, FF Dex, Triple Triad, Josephir, EXP Plus, Bands FF Corner, the Turks. There are so many resources out there. Often the Facebook is great because we all interact with each other, but keep in mind that there are websites that these groups all run, and they can all be accessible outside of Facebook. So if you haven't ever used Facebook, this is a good place to go to, and these are people you can go to who are more than anything willing to help out. So definitely pretty awesome. And then I sort of wanted to end today. It's a little bit of a short episode, but I sort of wanted to end today with a giveaway. If anybody is in the US group, we're going to be giving away a copy of 13.2 Collector's Edition, and I'm going to be giving away a playset of Sarah S card and foil, Mog S and foil, some Lightning Opus 5 pre-release cards. So all you've got to do is in the broadcast post in the US page, just make a post. It's going to be open to US residents only, just because I want to get this to the person ASAP. That way we can, get that to them. So those are the basics of the card game. Definitely, if you have any questions, ask us here. Ask us at any one of those wonderful resources. I definitely am glad that we were able to touch over things. I feel that it's a very good start, and if you take the time and you learn the rules and you make sure that you do what you want to do, especially in deck building, right? I know we're talking about deck building later, but it's very much so you doing what you want to do. You pick the thing you want to do and you make sure you do it well. And that is probably one of the most important things as a beginner. Don't worry about countering things in meta or worry about all these complex things at the beginning. Make sure you just start with a deck and you do the thing that you want to do well. Definitely going to put future episodes up on SoundCloud. Currently, I'm not putting this episode up. It's, as you can see, very image heavy. So it's definitely something that is probably best watched than tackled in a podcast. But eventually there will be podcast form. So definitely excited to have everybody. Definitely looking forward to future episodes and everything. So for now, I guess that's it. Short and sweet. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, whether it's in Twitch, YouTube, etc., when I upload this video, feel free to comment below. And that way, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them there. Of course, there's always groups in Final Fantasy US Facebook group that are willing to answer any questions. And absolutely, Square Enix has the official Final Fantasy TCG website, so that's definitely a place to go and visit. Definitely a place that you want to go for resources. It also lists all the cards too, so they have a card viewer, which will also help you learn. But again, what I would do is I would focus on the elements, just sort of understanding that each element has its own thing, and that you want to learn, how your playstyle is. Try out each element. Generally, if you want to start with a mono deck and it's easier for you, just so that way you don't have to worry about piecing together multiple elements in your deck. There are such things as 5-color decks, which tend to be more complicated, or 2-color decks like Fire Ice or Ice Lightning, or Earth Ice, or even thematic decks such as Knights, or Moogles, or etc. So there are many options as to what you want to build. So definitely appreciate everybody coming in today, and I guess we'll cut the episode there. I'll throw it up on YouTube, and we will see what people want to hear next episode. Alrighty, have a good day.
Can you see the sun is shining on me? It makes me feel so free, so alive. It makes me want to survive. And the sky, it makes me feel so high. The bad times pass me by, 'cause today is gonna be a good day. Can you feel the sunshine? Does you